So let's call this guy Dr. D. And Dr. D, well, he might be on drugs. So Dr. D, he just finished up his residency, and he just landed himself a job as a neurosurgeon. And one day, he's working in a hospital scheduled for a spinal surgery. So he and another surgeon, this guy, Dr. Kirby, they're doing the surgery. But Dr. D, he tries removing the patient's disc using the wrong tool. And Dr. Kirby notices and he's like, what the f are you doing, dude? And the patient starts bleeding everywhere, but Dr. D, he doesn't stop. And eventually the patient wakes up with permanent injuries. So Dr. Kirby's like, I am never working with you again. But whatever, Dr. D, he's already got another surgery lined up. So then Dr. D does that surgery, and he screws that one up too. And that patient wakes up paralyzed from the neck down. No problem, Dr. D just takes on another case, and he does another surgery, but that surgery actually goes well. Yeah! And the patient wakes up, and her vitals are all good. Until after the surgery, the patient starts bleeding out. Turns out Dr. D had accidentally cut a major vessel in her spinal cord by mistake. Oops. And by this point, of course, people around Dr. D have gotten very suspicious of him. He's screwing up on the job so bad, people are starting to look at him like, is this guy on drugs? So then his boss at the hospital asks him to do a drug test. And Dr. D does, but he turns in a sample diluted with water. So they make him take another one a few days later. And Dr. D does, but this one comes back clean. So he passes. But regardless of him passing that drug test, the hospital ultimately decides he's a liability. So they allow him to resign. Oh, but that's not going to stop Dr. D. Soon enough, he gets another job at a different medical center, and he operates on another patient. And this first patient that he operates on at this hospital, after the surgery, she ends up in the ICU. And then she has a stroke, and she ultimately passes away. The very next day, after that operation, he operates on another woman. And he, I guess, accidentally operates in the wrong place on her back, and she ends up in a wheelchair. Permanently. And as all this is going on, people around Dr. D start to notice like, man, he's just a really weird guy. Like he'll just show up to work in the same filthy, blood-covered scrubs he's been wearing for days. And sometimes there'll be holes in him and you can like see that he's not wearing underwear. So anyway, after less than a week at this new hospital, the hospital admin asks him to resign. But hey, whatever again, because Dr. D, he just goes on to get a new job at 2 different places, a hospital and a surgery center. And while he's working at those places, he damages a guy's spinal cord, leaving him paralyzed on the right side of his body. Then he does the same thing to another patient, leaving him partially paralyzed from the neck down. Then he operates on another guy's back, and before he sews him back up, he accidentally leaves surgical hardware inside the guy, and like just a long list of major screw-ups. And during this time, some of these patients, who are all messed up now, they start showing up to see Dr. Kirby, and they're like, hey, will you fix my botched surgery? And Kirby's like, let me guess, you went to Dr. D. F***ing hate that guy. And Kirby's pissed, and we know he doesn't like Dr. D. So Kirby and 2 other doctors report D to the Texas Medical Board, hoping to get his medical license revoked. And the medical board starts investigating, but that investigation takes a while, and 10 months go by. And Dr. D is still operating on people. And one day, he's operating on this guy, Jeff. And as he's operating, he cuts into Jeff's vocal cords, he punctures an artery, and puts a hole in his esophagus. Then he mistakes part of Jeff's neck muscle for a tumor, and he just abandons the operation halfway through. So his coworkers report him to the Texas Medical Board again. And by this point, the board had been investigating Dr. D for a while. And when they hear about what he just did to Jeff, I'm sure they're like, is this guy on drugs? And they must feel like he is because they finally suspend Dr. D's medical license. And now he's without a license and he's humiliated, and he retreats to go live with his parents back in Colorado. And from there, his life just falls apart. Over the next few months, he declares bankruptcy, he gets arrested for a DUI, he gets busted shoplifting, stealing pants and sunglasses and cologne and some other stuff. And after that shoplifting arrest, a Texas newspaper writes an article about Dr. D getting arrested. And Dr. D, he actually sees that article and then he goes to respond in the comments. And this dude must have been mad because he writes a whole ass manifesto. He's rage typing, ranting against anyone who he feels may have done him wrong. In fact, his internet comment is so long, when they finally printed it out, it was over 80 pages. You know, I'm starting to think Dr. D might be on drugs. Anyway, Dr. Kirby, he also sees this article and he also sees Dr. D's crazy long-ass comment. So he forwards that 80-page comment manifesto to the district attorney, along with all the other evidence he's been gathering. The district attorney sees it and she's like, okay, this guy's gotta be on drugs. And maybe we need to charge him for all these botched surgeries and deaths. Because here's what's crazy. In total, of the 38 surgeries that Dr. D had performed, point, he botched 33 of them. That means he screwed up 87% of the operations he did in a major way. Anyway, so the police arrest him, here's his mugshot, and they charge him with a bunch of stuff. He goes to trial, he's found guilty, and he's ultimately sentenced to life. And it's the first time in history a doctor's ever been convicted of botching surgeries like that. So, shout out to Texas.